Good evening, CLC. I'm Naomi Fida. Thank you so much for joining me here this evening. So as many of you may know, my family and I just got back from a trip to Mexico. So we were there for about 11 days, and we were visiting one of the missionaries from our church, which is Morph Mexico. And so if you don't know about this ministry, it's actually a daycare for at-risk kids. So I think that's also something very unique about this. So it's founded by a couple, Amy and Caleb Finch, who just felt God telling them to do this. So they were in Mexico and saw that this was a need because children did not have a safe place to go during their day while their parents were working. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But as I was just praying about what to share today, I was talking to John Scopa, and he said, well, just share for a couple of weeks about your trip and some of the things that, God put on your heart during that time. And, as I was preparing for this, I just came to Isaiah 58, it is, verses 10 and 11. It says, feed the hungry and help those in trouble. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually and give you water when you are dry, restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your city. Then you will be known as a rebuilder of the walls and a restorer of homes. And one of the reasons that stood out to me, maybe that God led me there, is this element of feeding the hungry and helping those in trouble. And, I know that there is a lot of need here in the States, and there's much that we can also do when God blesses that, when we take part in caring for others. I mean, there's so many scriptures that talk about, caring for the poor and how God blesses that. And so not necessarily that you have to go to Mexico to see it, but I think that there's a stark contrast when you go to, for myself, going to a very poor country and seeing that, because the poor that we know here is often not nearly the poor that they are in a third world country. And so just going back to some of what we were able to do and even see while we were there, and I feel like much of it was just being able to go and experience and walk alongside them in their ministry. But there's these children that are brought in early in the morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning. Often the moms are walking, so it's these dirt roads of the village, walking to bring their kids to the daycare. Often the women are not, and the families do not own vehicles, or if they do, it's a shared vehicle between many people. But typically they're living in kind of a one-room hut shack that is not something in our American world that we would think of as a home. Often it's not with running water inside, and there's maybe an outhouse, but they're just bringing their children and they're walking, and it's dark, and dropping them off, and then they have to continue walking all the way up to the main road. So I'm thinking it's about a mile to catch the bus to go to work. And then, they'll work a 10 to 12 hour day, probably more like a 10-hour day in the field, and then take the bus back, walk all the way in the mile or so from the main road, pick up their children at the daycare, and then go home. And just seeing that for starters, but then also seeing the the contrast of the wages versus the cost of safe food. And so in Mexico, for workers, the average wage is somewhere around 25 to 30, 125 to 135 US dollars. And groceries are the same price as they are here. And so I think of my own family of 5 that I could easily spend $135 a week on groceries alone. And to think that that's a sole income for a family. And then there's other bills like clothing or water, because nobody has water there. You have to pay for water to get delivered, which I'll talk more about that in another video, because that was one of the big projects that my husband worked on while we were there. But there's so much poverty. And so before the daycare was opened, these children had no place to go, because an average daycare, you think about a daycare like here in the States, you have to pay. And if they're barely making enough to pay for what we would consider a healthy diet out of their wages, then certainly they don't have the money to pay for daycare expenses. And so the way that the ministry, the Morph Mexico daycare is set up, is that yes, the families can give a donation, but I think even the highest donation is a couple hundred pesos a week, which is somewhere around 10 to 15 US dollars. And yet there's staff that need to be paid, and that runs solely on donations or generosity. And often, you see firsthand some of the sacrifices that this missionary family has made to follow God's call there. And it was very humbling, because I know that often they have used their own resources to pour into this, because they feel like that is what God has called them to do. And it was just so humbling, because I know that, like, what have I sacrificed that anywhere compares to that? And not that God calls all of us to that, but certainly, like, even in this passage, he's talking about help those that are in trouble and feed them and care for them. And that's part of the gospel message. And I just love the promise here, because it says when we do that, our light shines from the darkness, and the darkness around you will become as bright as noon. And so the daycare is set up on a hill in this very bumpy dirt road, which all of the roads are just so bumpy, so rutted and dirt, except for this one main road down the Baja. And it's like a light on a hill that is hope. It gives hope to the people. And I was able to see just firsthand the hope that the mothers have, that the workers have at being there. And there was this one father, and I don't speak Spanish, so much of it was interpreted to me, but he came in and so there's a lot of migrant families that come in and out based on the farming season. And so he had brought his children to the daycare, I think in the previous height of the farming season, maybe like the strawberry season. And now they were returning to the area. So it's been a couple months since his children were there, but he just said, he was saying, please, do you have room for me? Because I have these children, and Amy knew who they were because she'd had them before, but I need you to have room for them, because without them, I have no hope. I don't know what to do and who to care for them so that I can work to provide for my family. And so this place, it's like a place of safety. And where people can come, where these parents can come and bring their children and know that they're safe during the day. Because if they weren't, if they didn't have this open, think about, they'd be either home alone while the parents worked, which, you know, leaves them at risk for abuse, for trafficking, and also even for hunger. And that's another really unique thing about the daycare, is that they're trying to provide food for the children, so a breakfast and a lunch that's nutritious, because often the children, you know, as we're talking about the cost of groceries, so they're not well nourished because it's so expensive to get food that's not just, say, you know, your very, very simple, say, rice or something like that, to get a full balanced diet. And so there's just so many things that I could still say and continue to say, and there's still a lot to process, I think, from our trip. And I continue to process that, you know, just what we saw and how God is working there. And so in the weeks to come, I'll share a couple more things and some pictures, and hopefully just give you an idea of what goes on and how important it is. And I just encourage you to, you know, even in the whatever sphere of influence God has you, you know, we also can be those hands and feet of feeding those and helping those in trouble. And whether it is, you know, those that we know here, or even partnering with those that are on the front lines in third world countries through prayer. I mean, they need their prayer. They're in this battle, and a battle for children, for families, and thinking about how providing safety for children, giving them nutrition, and also teaching them about the gospel while they're under that care can change a family, can change a community, and how impactful that is. And they need our prayers. It is a fight. You know, I saw that firsthand, a fight in the spiritual, just one day at a time. There's always something happening. There's always an emergency. And it's very demanding on just the everyday emotions and your energy and the toll that takes as well. And we can be a part of that. We can be a part of lifting them up in prayer and carrying them as they minister. And it's not just these missionaries. There's many missionaries. I'm sure that you know others and are connected with others as well. But such a reminder that they're serving in the ways that we don't see. And I'm just going to close with that for now. I feel like I've rambled on a little bit. So God bless you, and I look forward to chatting with you more next week.